Welcome to week 3 of MPAI 600 here at Georgetown University's Applied Intelligence Program. Just want to start off with a few announcements, some dates to keep in mind. 21 June, that'll be a Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have an office call. If you are briefing, and that's groups 1, 2, and 3, that's when you'll be briefing. But for everyone else, if you want to sit in on those briefs or you want to contact me either before or after that, we can. And I could talk to you in person if there's issues with the course, issues with the upcoming paper, or anything in general. That would be a great time that we can talk face to face, or at least over the Zoom interface. And then week 7, we'll have an office call 5 July. That's again groups 4 through 6 will be briefing, and that will be they'll brief their topic. And then we'll also do is a job talk. We'll talk about careers, how to use this program to advance your careers in the federal bureaucracy, in the intelligence community, in the defense contracting world. So if you're interested in that stuff and you want to hear my perspective, please be there for that job talk. If you have insights that you want to share for hiring, and again, I don't have a monopoly on this, please bring those insights as well so your fellow classmates can learn from them. So we're going to do that 5 July at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, in addition to the briefings that are on that day. So paper 1 is due pretty much right now, depending on when you're watching this. I didn't get any requests for extensions, so I expect to see paper 1, the collection strategy, in my inbox tomorrow morning or Monday morning when I get into work. And I should have those back to you by the end of the week. Don't go ahead in the course. I've had a couple of people do this. I designed the course so that everyone's on the same sheet of music week to week to week. It's not a correspondence course where you just do the assignments and get a diploma at the end. It's designed that you everyone's in week 2 and they interact with the readings, they interact with each other based on the week 2 readings, and then we go the next week. So please stay within the weeks from here on in, and as well as I give guidance in these YouTube sessions week to week. So you'd want to be familiar with the guidance before you go on the next week. And then finally, I want to put this in. As we're grading papers, I'm grading papers this week, and I grade future papers. I want to just make some things clear, and this evolves from something not in this class, but in previous class I had, where people weren't happy with the grades they got and with some of the comments or some of the feedback that I gave. Just a couple things. One, I give hundreds out on the current events and other things, or I'm more likely to give you full credit. You will not get 100 in the individual papers that are for your assignments. I want to make that clear. So if you don't get 100, don't be surprised because no one else got 100. I grade maybe a little bit harshly. I owe you feedback on your papers. I owe you what I think is your analysis can be better. So don't take those personally. Don't take my comments personally. Don't take what my sense of analysis is personally. So if there's an issue with that, please let me know. And I am going to give you honest feedback on your papers. I am going to grade harshly, a lot harder than I do for your normal discussion sections. But I also don't want people to feel insulted. So if there's an issue, please come to me and we can talk it out in that way. Sometimes my comments on papers and comments on assignments might be what I'm trying to say in one way, but might be interpreted a lot harder than I intended them to be. So make sure, if there's an issue with that, please come to me and we can talk via Zoom session or even talk on the phone and clear any issues up. So just keep that in mind as you get your papers back or we start grading papers this coming week and then for the weeks ahead. And then current events, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but something that didn't make a whole lot of headlines, and it should have, Puerto Rico and the potential of 45 to 4,600 people died in the hurricane in Puerto Rico, and that's again some of it's people who died in the actual hurricane. Some people died because of secondary issues and contamination of water, lack of electricity. But that's a significant number, 4,500. I didn't realize that those are the numbers they were thinking of. And again, this is an independent study, and I haven't read the independent study, but it's from Harvard, so I do trust that there's some sort of credibility behind it. But if that number is true, it would be worse than 9/11. It would be twice as bad as Katrina. It would be one of the worst disasters natural disasters anyway, in our country's history. That's pretty significant. I know people here on the Homeland Security track, and I know maybe disaster relief isn't a main focus of this program, but again, people are working the Homeland Security or local law enforcement enterprises, and I think now Puerto Rico is starting to turn into a failure, and the question is why? Is it bad from the federal government? Was it state and local officials? Was it just Puerto Rico is an island and it's harder to provide disaster relief to an island? Is it because the infrastructure in Puerto Rico was in such disarray to begin with, and that, again, they don't have the same level of resiliency in Puerto Rico that you might see as far as infrastructure as you might say if this hurricane had hit off the coast of Northern Virginia or something along those lines. Again, just things to consider, and as we go in this course, we're going to kind of use the Socratic method to determine failure. Is Pearl Harbor a failure? What are the variables that led it to a failure? Well, Puerto Rico is now a failure, and the one thing I think you should be asking yourselves as professionals in this field is, okay, what were the variables that led to the failures in Puerto Rico? And again, was it one of those factors? Was it an island? Was it federal officials, local officials? Use the Socratic method to determine what you think were the primary drivers for failure in Puerto Rico. Okay, so review of last week, and I think great comments, great discussion boards, or posts on the discussion board this week. I think there was a lot of depth in most of the posts, and I'll comment on that this next week. But just review last week, we talked requirements, and again, the requirements were there so you can integrate it into the collection plan. That's hopefully you got from the first parts of the lecture and the Lowenthal book about requirements. That's what kicks off the collection plan, which kicks off the analysis, which kicks off the decisions by policymakers based on the intelligence. The asking the right questions is the key point. So intelligence traps, and we went through those in detail in the tradecraft primer. I just want to kind of hit some of the key ones: confirmation bias and mirror imaging. We're going to see these over and over and over again. And in fact, arguably, going back to the Korea example I talked about last week, we did this in the run up to the summit that now looks like is back on. We heard confirmation bias is essentially you hear what you want to hear. And I think in the Korea example, the Korea summit, we hear what we want to hear. We did this, the South Koreans hear what we want to hear. And I don't know how this summit's going to work out, but certainly that's another a point of confirmation bias. And then mirror imaging. And again, I go back to the Korea example here. Let me back up here. I've heard a lot of people say Kim Jong-un is irrational. And they say it because he executes a lot of people. He executes his uncle, and he puts people on firing squads on the, by anti-aircraft artillery, which people are on firing squads in North Korea. And we think, well, he's crazy. He's irrational. If he's going to do that, he's irrational. I think we're taking our Western point of view on and trying to put it on his perspective. Yeah, we would assume if any world leader acted like Kim Jong-un in a democracy in the West, if he started to kill his own uncle, we would assume, yeah, he's irrational, or he killed his own half-brother. But his perspective is, if I don't kill my uncle or I don't kill my half-brother, I'm going to be on that firing squad. I'm going to be on the other end of or be killed by my own people. So oftentimes, again, we put our own Western viewpoints on his actions, when in fact his actions are rational. If he wants to stay in power, if he wants to stay alive, he's got to, North Korean politics becomes a blood sport. So again, we do a lot of mirror imaging just in this North Korea scenario going forward as well. So again, just we listed out those intelligence traps. I just want you to think about those as we look at issues, whether it's criminal issues, whether it's these large geopolitical issues, whether it's issues in business intelligence as well. We're all victims of this, these intelligence traps. And I think the Confessions outlines a lot of these intelligence traps. And I think Mike brought up some good points breaking into detail on this case study and applying this case study to, or applying the intelligence tradecraft primers to this case study. And again, the Confessions, it's classic confirmation bias. It's confirmation bias to an extreme. The Detective Ford in that case wanted to hear what he wanted to hear, or he heard what he wanted to hear, and he dismissed stronger DNA evidence, witness evidence, because he wanted the confession, or he wanted the confession to stand, or the 4 confessions, I should say. That is classic confirmation bias. In this case, he's taking it to an extreme. Vividness bias, because a couple of you brought this up, and if you look in the video, the jury hearing the confession, and the confession was coached by Detective Ford, we know that now, but hearing that, how he killed those people, the jury was certainly, I don't want to say a victim of vividness bias, but the prosecutors were using vividness bias to try and get a conviction from the jury. And that's something, again, that's key. Something, I think one of you brought this up, and this is key when we talk about the Iraq War, the Iraq WMD case study. Those of you who are my age, or maybe a little bit older, might remember Colin Powell taking a vial of powder at the time and saying this much anthrax can kill somebody or kill hundreds of people if Saddam Hussein had it. Well, that was use of a prop. That was use of vividness bias, and it won a lot of people over. But in fact, that's not evidence. That's just a guy holding up a vial saying that if Saddam Hussein had this level of anthrax, he could kill hundreds of people. Well, again, he's using the vividness bias to expound his point. Politicization. A lot of times in the Lowenthal, politicization deals a lot with large strategic intelligence issues and issues that Congress or the president kind of forces on the larger intelligence community, and it adjusts their viewpoints. Okay, that's politicization at the base level, but I think you can say politicization happened in the Norfolk Ford case study, where the detectives and the prosecutors had a lot of pressure to solve this case, to get a conviction, especially when no one was willing, they weren't finding the right people. So they concocted evidence, or at least bad evidence accelerated itself through the chain because they were under pressure to do so. This is a form of politicization. They weren't allowed to make their assessments within themselves, that they had to shoot it through, or bad assessments had to answer to another case here. Negative evidence. I like that a couple of people brought this up as well. I'm going to talk about this in detail in the Iraq WMD case study. The question is, all right, let me try and pin this guy to the crime. That's, all right, let me try and find the evidence that says this guy's the crime. The question that wasn't asked is, if this guy committed the murder, one of the people that confessed, what else should we have been seeing? where was the motive? Where was his opportunity? Where were all the things that you should line up that we don't see? Why aren't we seeing this? So that's a clear point I want to make kind of clear at the onset. And all of you have to use negative evidence in your when you're doing particularly criminal investigations or intelligence investigations. Again, you're not. If you say go find me Iraq WMD evidence, you're going to find Iraq WMD evidence. That's just the nature, or Iraq WMD pre-war evidence. You're going to find that evidence. If I say go find that this guy's a child molester, you'll find evidence that this guy's a child molester. If you say go find me the aluminum tubes or evidence of Iraq nuclear program, you'll find it. What you need to find out though is if Iraq is building a nuclear program, why are we not seeing all these other characteristics? And that's, again, classic evidence of, or classic example of negative evidence in this case study. And then, Georgetown values, I don't know how many people are religious in this course, or Jesuit or Catholic. I don't know if it really matters to a whole lot of people, but there is, Georgetown has a value of justice in this program, and I think this is a classic injustice that was only rectified a couple of months ago. This documentary was filmed in 2010. These cases were only expunged, I think, in October of 2017. So, this injustice lasted for 20 years in one form or another. And again, Georgetown has as a Jesuit school, justice is one of the guiding principles for some of these courses as we go forward. And I'd also add, some of you blame Detective Ford correctly on this issue, and he was definitely a rogue cop. But before you blame him, as I mentioned in the lectures, it was prosecutors, judges, juries, appellate courts, even a media were all victims of some of these intelligence traps, these analytical biases. So I will conclude with this is, don't think you're impervious to these biases. The best thing to do is recognize that you have these biases and know when you're actually evaluating evidence with them. So that I'll wrap up that unit with those issues. And then previewing week 3. So I like history. I use history to illustrate case studies. I do want to say that even though these histories are primarily military related, I think they're applicable to criminal law enforcement. They're applicable to business intelligence. Everyone could be guilty of some of these failures that we talk about in these coming weeks. So 2 case studies, both strategic surprise, Pearl Harbor, and the Yom Kippur War. I think these are, again, the classic cases in military history of not only was we had known, both the United States and Israel in these cases had a known adversary. They knew that they wanted to attack. In fact, sometimes they knew within a few weeks they knew an attack was going to happen, yet they were caught flat-footed. And the question is why? Why did the systems fail in these two case studies? And the question, so the one thing is to think about, and this is as we go forward, is where were the failures? And we talked about the intelligence cycle in week 1, and I want to emphasize that going forward. So when you're going through the readings and going through the documentaries, where did people fail? Was it in collection? Was it after collection when there's supposed to be analysis? Was there a screw up the way the analysis was communicated to the policymakers? Did the policymakers fail to act? Or I say underlying circumstance. Could it have just been stuff happens? Bad things just happen no matter how smart your intelligence is. So as you're going through the readings, think about where the failures occur, what happened and who is to blame, essentially. And so the documentary is The Doll. Excellent book. We use it for Pearl Harbor in this chapters. In the later part of the course, we're going to use it for 9/11. But A Doll is excellent at talking about the pathologies of intelligence failure, the pathologies of underlying pathologies of Pearl Harbor. Yom Kippur War, Avi Shalom, about the intelligence estimate before the Yom Kippur War happened. For those of you who don't remember, I don't think anybody was alive during the Yom Kippur War here, but in 1973, the Egyptians and Syrians attacked Israel, and the Israelis didn't know about it till literally hours before it happened. Israel eventually won the war, but the first few weeks they were thrown out on their heels, and they thought that they could lose. And so they've always wondered how this happened, and that's what you'll explore in this coming week. Al Jazeera, The Crossing, that's the documentary. It's actually a 3-part documentary. You only have to really watch part 1 to get a feel for this course, or for this module. So if there's questions or issues, please let me know, and I look forward to reading your collection papers this weekend and interacting or seeing your discussion posts.